Hello audience, it's great to be here. As Ian said, I'm Chloe Thomas. I'm a podcast host, author and advisor, and it gives me great pleasure to bring you this panel, which I know is going to be very thought-provoking from the discussions we've already been having. Now, in the world of e-commerce, as we saw in Daniel's slides, we are very numbers focused, aren't we? It's all about the AOV, the traffic, the conversion rate increase, numbers, 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 and we frequently forget about those human beings that are the root of our success. We have, at the end of the day, our job is to persuade those customers to buy. And the most powerful thing you can do to persuade a customer, to persuade any of us to do anything, is to use emotion. Be it fear, be it desire, be it excitement. Emotion is the thing that has the most power to make a human being do pretty much anything. As Daniel Kahneman said, who's the godfather of behavioral science, he said, if you can make them feel, they will buy more. Now, the good news is we are all here in agreement to the fact that emotion is powerful. So you're not going to be getting a debate about the science, so breathe a sigh of relief there, rather a debate about whether emotion is a nice theory or a profit necessity. So I'm going to start by asking the panel to introduce themselves, because I think that would be a very good place to start. But also, as you introduce yourselves, chaps, if you could explain how emotion has an impact in your day-to-day e-commerce lives. And Simon, if I could start with you, that would be great.
Okay, hello everybody, I'm Simon. I'm the founder and managing director of Diligent Commerce. We are an e-commerce agency for whom emotional commerce is very much our USP. So we're thinking about it all the time. It's an area that we focus on because we feel passionately that that's an extremely important lever in terms of getting people to buy more.
Okay, and then Sean, if we come to you next.
Right, so we run a multi-branded footwear website, and I think you can have the sort of money, sales, money scenario and deploy emotion to very good effect. So for us day to day, it's probably about the overall CRO effort and the stuff we've done on things like, the use of scarcity messaging, social proof, certainty in terms of the proposition and how we're delivering on the proposition, and sort of very clear answers to very specific inquiries like, do you have this and where can I get it? Mm-hmm. We also have live chat on the site. We make use of video and text chat. There's real people in there having a real interaction with the customer. And we measure sentiment. We measure customer sentiment with every transaction. So we have a very robust ability to take temperature in terms of how the customer is feeling.
So quite a lot day to day then, in reality. Okay, cool. Philip, how about you?
So I'm Philip Driver, head of e-commerce for Canon, and as a brand, obviously emotion is really important to us. We're trying to find out what makes our customers tick, and in fact, we've changed quite a lot of our strategy recently. So our brand messaging now is about how do we help you tell your stories, how do you bring your emotion to us, and how do we help you with that? How do we help you express that to all your friends and colleagues, and what does that look like? And we've tried to bring that brand messaging into the e-commerce experience to make us different from traditional retail, so we're telling that story at the same time as presenting the offering as well. So we're trying to pull that through. I think data can answer those questions to a certain extent. You're never going to get into the pinpoint detail, but I do remember being in Facebook 5 years ago and they were saying they were trying to quantify happiness. So there are people out there trying to figure that out. Whether or not we get there is debatable, but I think data can help you pinpoint what your customers are looking for.
Okay, so we've got Philip on the end there, who's you're focused on that big brand emotional impact, what Canon makes people feel. We've got Sean, the retailer of brands, very much focused on getting that order in. So is this, with the scarcity, with the social proof and all the rest of it, so is this emotion that we should be bringing to e-commerce, is it about that short-term win, or is it about the long-term lifespan? Sean, you look like you're edging to answer this one. So.
I am now. Well, there's the question of brand equity and how you want to articulate positioning to the wider market. And of course, you want that to be positive, feel-good positioning, trusted positioning. So it isn't just about today's sale, but it is about a sale at some point. If you're a retail business, that it is. But you've got to do that in a context where the customer trusts you and has some comprehension of what you're about. And I think so clearly it's more than just today.
the endless juxtaposition in e-commerce, the long-term versus the short-term gain.
Yeah.
But for you, is
Yeah,
it all
ultimately,
about
it's an
brand?
e-commerce store that we run, and we do want to make that sale when people are on that store, and so the store is geared up to do that. But the wider brand piece has to be about what are you buying into, what's that lifetime proposition, and how do we help you with imaging throughout your entire experience with Canon. So we have to layer that in at some point, but ultimately, once you're on a sale page, yes, we obviously want to make that sale there and then.
Yeah.
It's both short-term and long-term. I mean, short-term, there are all sorts of different things that you can do, emotional triggers to actually push people, or nudge people, should I say, towards a sale. And I'm sure that you do many or all of them. But fundamentally, it's a long-term gain. And one of the reasons why that's so important is because, you're doing well if you can get beyond single figures in conversion rates. It's invariably 1%, 2%. So what about that 98% that don't buy? Who's focusing on that? What's that all about? How do you actually get them to come back, get them to actually become loyal consumers in the long term? And that is a long-term play, and that is all about, I think it's all about the brand. And I think sometimes that piece is overlooked, perhaps not by you, Canon, but overlooked in the kind of day-to-day obsession with driving sales.
Sean, if you've got something to come back on that, please do.
Well, I think I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we all want the 98% to become part of the 2%. So I don't think those things are mutually exclusive at all. But in the end, we all inhabit a context, and I'm not going to do any more grim. There's been enough grim this morning already. But that context is one where we're KPI'd in certain kinds of performances, and there's arguably a degree of pressure on those performances. So that 2% is core in terms of how we see the world. So we certainly want the 98% to be a different kind of, a smaller slice with a bigger 2, but in the end it has to sit in a context we can comprehend.
I suppose the good thing is that if we're doing those mini tactical, emotional nudges, the social proof, the trust building, the getting them to buy for the first time, we are in some ways building the longer term emotional impact, because fundamentally the biggest emotional impact is when someone gets that physical product and they're delighted by it.
Well, yeah. Yes. The other thing I would say is maybe there's a nuance between active and passive when it comes to this question of nudging, in that we've certainly tried to iterate on both. So something like scarcity messaging, you don't click on it, you don't touch it, but it's there, it's in the background, and we've certainly found that the passive delivery of messaging is much more useful as a means of getting people down the funnel than expecting them to interact with an element on a product page, for example. They just don't want to do that particularly. So if you try and engineer the situation in the wrong way, you might just fall flat on your face.
So Sean, could you just, before we go on to a wider question, but could you just explain what you mean by the passive version? Could you give us an example? Because I'm sure,
right.
I think I'm getting it, but I'm sure some of our audience would like an explanation.
For example, a countdown clock that tells you how many minutes you've got left before the next day delivery service is removed today.
Yep.
That would be passive. Active would be offering a facility where someone can click on a radio button or something like that to ask their friends in Facebook Messenger what they think of the item they're looking at.
Okay.
So, a very active action from the customer versus something that's atmospheric
That they're
in
seeing
nature.
as they go around. Okay, cool. So we mentioned on the long-term play that it's about building the brand and getting that brand recognition. Now, there are businesses where brand is far more important than there are in other businesses. We've got kind of two of them here. We've got Canon, where you're selling your own products. It's all about the Canon brand. We've got Shoe, where you're selling a whole range of brands as well as having your own brand. So, and then we get into the luxury sector, where brand, quite frankly, is all. So, Simon, if we could start with you on this one. What is emotion more important the more luxury your brand becomes? And if you're very transactional, is it less important?
Well, I guess if you're selling widgets, emotion isn't too important, and maybe even the countdown clock wouldn't matter too much if you're just buying widgets. So yes, I'm sure that there are certain categories for which this is more pertinent than others. Yeah. But fundamentally, we're talking about brands here, and regardless of what you sell, you have a duty to actually bring that brand to life online, as well as just trying to sell as many of the items as possible. And if you do that, and if you do that successfully, you will see more engagement, more return visits, and more sales at the end of the day. Is it more pertinent to certain sectors? Yes. I mean, if you are luxury, the fundamental benefit of a luxury product is less utility and more about what it says about you. So for sure, those sectors must really go for it. But it's equally true of a retailer of a lesser brand, not a lesser brand, you know what I mean? So I don't think it's exclusive to luxury. For sure, luxury really need to go to town on it, but I think it's pertinent to all brands, and it's all about that 98%.
I've got nodding heads from the guys over here.
Well, I think if you substitute the word emotion for people, that might be easier to understand. You know, I think if you can see why luxury retailers have really struggled to get online, because that theatre, the investment, the heuristics of the thick carrier bag with the ribbon on the top, those things are really, really important.
Yeah.
And at the other end of the spectrum, buying your bin bags for your kitchen on Amazon doesn't require a deep emotional commitment with a person. So you can see why different verticals or different categories would require different applications. But I don't think it's coincidental that the conversion performance you get when you put people in front of customers, and that's online as well as offline, is dramatically different than when they're just dealing with a piece of functionality. So I think the emotional resonance you get with a real person in a live scenario delivers a very different outcome to a purely functional experience.
So live chat is essential.
It delivers a very different performance.
Philip, anything to add on that?
Sure. We actually have to deal with both ends of that spectrum because we have ink, which is kind of a panic purchase. You run out, you need to get that ink now, you want it next day delivery, and that's just, again, the bin bag kind of scenario where you need to get that. But you're coming through our e-commerce store, and we're still presenting the whole store as a premium experience where you can also buy a £5,000 lens, you know, a serious piece of kit which is considered purchase. So we're actually trying to balance that and make sure that the feeling is consistent, that we're still bringing our brand values and that premium feel, irrespective of what it is you're actually buying, because maybe next time you do come back for that £4,000 lens. So we have to balance that in our brand outlook, I think.
So you're giving the same messages to someone whether they've come on for the 20 quid ink versus the 5,000.
We want that journey to be, you know, we know why you're there, we know you want it quickly, so we're not going to try and present other things and force you down a different journey, but whilst you're here, it has to be that same, still a seamless experience, and we're trying to, you know, e-commerce is about removing friction ultimately, so we're going to make sure that's super slick, but we have to make sure that when you're here, you also get that brand feel, that brand look.
We've mentioned Amazon a couple of times here, and generally I think Amazon's going to be mentioned a lot today. You could at first glance assume Amazon is a non-emotional business. They're not aiming for that customer emotion. I don't want to get into a debate about whether they are or whether they aren't, but if the most successful global retailer is not playing on the big picture emotional levels, do we have to pay any credence to emotion at all?
Yes.
Straight in there.
all the more reason for doing it. You know, if the gorilla in the room isn't doing it, and you've got to somehow, and this is tricky, outgun him, then all the more reason for actually giving your customers a distinct, meaningful reason to visit you rather than them. Because otherwise, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be a winner-take-all situation. So, regardless of the category, luxury or otherwise, if Amazon is a competitor of yours, you must give people a reason to come to you, and that has to be something beyond just, you know, commodity commerce or all the things that they're doing in effect. So, I think it's absolutely paramount. Jeff Bezos knows Daniel Kahneman, has spent time with Daniel Kahneman and other big platforms in get-togethers in Silicon Valley. They know exactly how this works. And you only have to look at something like their one-click checkout to understand that they do know how the psychology of the human being works. It's some sort of, you know, it's some sort of motivational tool, isn't it? The more you press it, the more you need it. And they know exactly what that is doing to people. I think it's patently obvious that they know what they're doing. Even if the emotion isn't writ large, it's there. It's there. It's inherent to how they build what they do.
So, Philip, as someone who's actively competing with Amazon to make sure you're getting the print cartridge sale and the camera sales and all the rest of it, if Amazon has taken the ease of use, the subtle emotional play, is it all about making sure that the Canon brand is out there to make sure people decide you're who they want to buy from, not just go for the easy?
Yeah, we made a very conscious decision that we were going to do something different to retail. Ultimately, it's an e-commerce store that we're providing here, but it's this premium experience where we can show the brand in its best light, give the full range, e-commerce are a fabulous partner for Canon. They sell, one of our biggest partners, and they do what they do very, very well. I think we all get very caught up in what is Amazon, how do they do these things, but they do what they do very well, but they don't do end-to-end, they don't do everything for you, and as a brand, you have multiple options about how to deal with your customers and treat your customers and fulfill their needs. Amazon is one of those where you want the thing and you want to go buy it now, and they do that very well. Within our store, we try to create that premier experience where we can help tell a story, bring you into our ecosystem, show how all of our products work together rather than it being about that one purchase.
So as we're talking about this, I'm reminded of something which Mary Porter said earlier this year, which is that we are moving as a society from social status symbols to a society of status stories. And it seems to me that's what the normal in inverted commas, e-commerce retailer can have over Amazon, is that story of being able to go and brag to your friends over dinner that I bought this from. Does that fit with this world of emotion? Is it about those stories coming through, the power of the About Us page?
Absolutely. And if you ask what are the things that you can do to actually start to improve the emotional quotient, I would say right up there is tell a story. Tell me why you exist. Get me to buy into the brand before I actually buy the product. And storytelling is absolutely fundamental to that. So and you can do that for the brand and the website as a whole. You can actually do it for specific products. There's some evidence to suggest that actually if you tell a story around a specific product, you get a better conversion rate than if you just tell the bare bones statistics or whatever. So definitely.
No, Sean, you're nodding away there, and you've already said about that human connection.
He's totally right. And I think one of the stories that you tell is about is the social story, and it's how you look to your friends and what other people have said about this. And I think there's two broader questions here. There's digital natives and social have a very particular relationship that three men of a certain age won't necessarily understand in exactly the same way. And there's the question of what's the starting point for that story, because the way you tell that story has got to be governed by a set of principles that are rooted in something that is benign, or at least rooted in a truth. So if you look at some of the very disturbing stuff that's going on at the minute with fake news, clickbait, there's lots of stories being told. But now we're starting to question, well, which stories are actual stories and which are not? And we've got a whole generation of people that we're certainly trying to sell stuff to who don't quite know what is fact and what is fiction, and are groping around in a social ecosystem for trying to find out what the truth is. And so we need to govern what we do here with some sort of set of principles, I think.
I completely agree with you there, and I think that information and reliability front is exactly what you were talking about, Philip. We're saying if someone comes to Canon, they get that full story and the integration. So I guess information and knowledge and truth to some extent, reliability maybe is a key part of it.
Obviously, when people are coming to Canon, they're coming because they trust Canon. They trust us to kind of fulfill the requirements they have around imaging. And around the storytelling piece, that's, again, the way we've pivoted recently is our previous messaging was come and see, come to us and we'll tell you the stories. But actually that's not what the story needs to be. We've changed that now, and it's kind of live for the story. You tell us what your stories are, we will help you live your stories. How do we provide a whole ecosystem of telling stories? How do we help you tell your stories, and how do we provide the right tools, services and technology to help you do that? And data is really important throughout that. So understanding how people are using our products, in what ways, where are they not using us and using something else, and how do we fulfill that need as well? That helps us kind of fill those gaps.
Okay, a bit of a curveball question for you here, guys, because I think we've reached quite a nice point on our journey through our debate. Is there ever a role to play for negative emotion in this? Because fear and the negative emotions are a great way of manipulating, maybe, should I put it that strongly, a customer to do something, but there are softer options. Does negativity have an emotion, is a negative emotion have a place to play here?
Within retail specifically?
Within e-commerce and retail, I think.
It can do. You can certainly deploy anxiety in a very controlled way to take people further down the funnel, for example, as long as that anxiety that you're engineering is rooted in truth. So, you know, when you're on a hotel website and there's always 10 other people looking at it right now, quick, get the room quick. It's the
urgency
or the
of the
airline,
scarcity.
you know, quick, get the seat at this price, quick, it's going to change price. So as long as it's rooted in some actual fact, that can be benign if executed properly, I think.
I think that was a very, very good answer.
It's the early bird ticket to the conference. That's a negative anxiety fear. So I think it is being deployed. I think you can do it, but not. You don't want to spook your audience too much because then they might not come back. I mean, the thing about negative emotions, if you measure it, and we're working on a tool to actually measure this, because I think it's really important to actually have some, you know, tool and data behind what is otherwise a nice theory. But I think it's important to be able to track negative emotions as well, because that's almost as telling as the good stuff. You know, is there something that you're doing that actually does turn people off, and what is it? Because if you can rectify that, then that's going to help you for sure. So I think I would look at it in those terms. Can the negative emotion or the identification help you with your brand?
Sure.
I was just about to say, Facebook's very interested in this area because I think Facebook did some experiments, might be as long as 5 years ago, where they showed more negative or more positive posts to individual and then measured their behavior thereafter. And people who saw more negative posts were more inclined to post negatively themselves. So you can definitely, there is the potential to engineer in a way that we've got to be very, very careful about. And, you know, when you see that the Trump campaign spent $85 million on Facebook advertising, you know that this is potent. It's very potent, and we have a responsibility to think carefully about how we're deploying the negatives, you know, much more than the positives, I think.
I suppose the ultimate message of whether you've taken negative too far is if you get the repeat purchase. Because if you con's quite a strong word, but it's the one that's coming to mind. If you con a customer into buying by deploying too much negative emotion, etc., then they're not going to be coming back again, are they?
Exactly, they'll find you out. So you know, so it's got to be better than that.
So I'm going to take us out of this lane of negativity. Let's get back into the positive world. Do you guys have any examples of someone who's doing it really well? I'm going to start off with Philip for this one.
Well, I hope we're trying to do it well at Canon. You know, we're on a progression path to make sure we're being as transparent with customers as possible and using our data as well as we can and driving our brand messaging throughout the whole experience. And we're doing more of that as we progress as well. So we're acquiring new services and we're acquiring new ways of speaking to our customers, because I think the seismic shift for Canon, at least, is that we used to make products, and that was the one product, you bought the one product, and there you go, Mr. Customer or Mr. Retailer, to deal with that. And now the expectation is that all of our products are connected. We have a holistic way of speaking to you. You can speak to us in multiple different ways, and we have to start to deal with that somehow. And that's the progress that we're trying to do. I don't think anybody's really managed to get that end-to-end experience down really yet. So that's where we're all on that journey towards. I think some companies do it better than others, but all in different ways slightly.
Okay.
I think there's plenty of examples in the big platforms where it's been very well executed. And I know they've had a bit of a kick-in recently, but Uber are very, very good at generating positive sentiment as they gamify you through the very, very short wait between your request for a cab and the arrival of the cab. I think they do that terrifically well. And it's actually a very positive emotional experience that ultimately usually delivers as well. So they're a good example.
Yeah, I think the best place to look is in the kind of the digital natives, the brands that have sort of started there rather than having to try to get there from elsewhere. So there's a fantastic fashion brand that's relatively new called Reformation, which is all based on an eco-environmental, good to the environment kind of planet, fantastic storytelling, very well executed. That's the kind of brand I want to buy into. That's the kind of site I'll go back to time and time again. And there's loads of examples elsewhere. But if you really want to look for the newer ones who've started and sell purely online, because they're the best in class, and they get this emotional thing down to a T.
Yeah.
Okay, and just to wrap up the final question, for anyone out there who's gone, right, we've listened to the debate, we are convinced emotion is a profit necessity, but have done nothing on this yet, Where would you start? And I'll start with you, Simon. So the top tips for getting started with emotion.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff you could do tomorrow, which are the emotional triggers that we've touched on, scarcity, start telling a story. That's really, really important. I think the key thing is it's a relationship. You've got to think, how do you have a relationship with someone? And I think there's a tendency for people just to think that, you know, if you buy the flowers and book the restaurant, that somehow you're going to get there. And actually, no, it's a longer term thing. You need to attract me visually. You need to engage with me. You need to have a conversation with me. You need to listen to me. You need to actually find ways of actually inviting me into your website so that I feel part of your brand. It's about building a relationship, which takes time, but you can start tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, it's about having that orientation, and that's how you build your website, how you build your communications, how you reach out to people both there and elsewhere. It's all about relationship. That's what brands are built on.
Okay, excellent. Sean?
The sexiest one for us has been scarcity messaging, because it really did deliver performance improvement. Mm-hmm. But maybe in a more general sense, ask your customers what they think and then publish what they tell you, warts and all, in a really transparent way.
Okay, cool. Two good tips there. And Philip?
For us, it comes down to kind of two different things. So data and understanding the data you have, not just your commercial data from your e-commerce store, but all the data you probably sat on and never really thought about how that might be then applied in different ways. So we have storage solutions for photos, so we know roughly what people are taking pictures of. We can use that to make assumptions about different segments and use that to push forward our designs and experiences. But also for us, it was, what does the brand feel like in an e-commerce environment? What does that actually feel like to purchase direct from Canon, and how is that different? And we need to identify what customers want from us as the brand, and we had to do a lot of work again around data and segmentation, but also quality surveys and surveying and focus groups to talk direct to customers and get that what is their expectation from Canon.
Excellent. Well, some great advice there for any of you who are looking to get started off in emotion. Now, if you've enjoyed this discussion about emotion, we have more emotional content coming up in the stream I'm chairing later, just a quick little plug, which is the Analyze stream number 1. And we're going to wrap up the panel here. And thank you all for listening, and thank you very much to my panel guests.